I'm Andrew Joseph Keith. In this video, I'm going to be going over the next assignment for the portrait sculpting course, sculpting a celebrity or public figure. I'm going to be doing my own sculpture of Scarlett Johansson that plays Black Widow for the Avengers, and I'll be using Chavant medium NSP clay. For this assignment, you can do it whatever size you want. I'm going to be doing about half-life size or maybe a little bit larger. And remember to follow the 10 steps to portrait sculpting that I went over in a previous lesson. If you need a refresher on those steps, it starts with collecting references. We want to get plenty of reference images of the celebrity or public figure, especially the side profile view. Next is building the armature. For this, I'm just doing a floor flange with a metal pipe on top of a baseboard, and then I've added some paper and a plastic bag over top. Next is a simplified block in, which is that wedge shape. Then we'll get the likeness from the side profile view, then add in the bony structures, then the likeness from the front view, checking our sculpture throughout the process, working around the sculpture from every angle, finalizing the facial features, and then finally working on the texture. The whole course is built around these 10 steps, so make sure that you're familiar with them and have each step in your mind as you're working on that stage of the sculpting process. As you're choosing somebody to sculpt, make sure that it's somebody where you can get plenty of reference images or even videos so that you have a lot of visual information to draw from. If you're sculpting somebody that you only have a few reference photos of, that's probably not enough visual information to capture an accurate likeness. There are several phenomena that make portrait sculpting such a challenge. For one thing, we're really good at judging the small, minute differences in the shape and structure and distances between all of the facial features so that we can quickly recognize people. The face is a series of shapes, shadows, measurements, and relationships that our mind compares from person to person, and we're really good at it. So when we're sculpting a person, there's billions of ways to sculpt it wrong, and only a few ways to sculpt it to where the person is recognizable and where the sculpture looks like it's been skillfully done. We have the technology to get a 3D scan of someone's face and reproduce it with machine-like precision, but this usually isn't as interesting or impressive as a masterfully done sculpture. Being able to capture the likeness while perhaps pushing some of the features slightly so that the sculpture has an element of the sculptor's style, that is something that's really difficult. If you can do that, you're well on your way to mastering sculpture. If you're taking on portrait sculpting, you're taking on one of the most difficult challenges for artists. So give yourself some slack and don't get too frustrated if it takes a lot of time and energy to develop this skill set. To be perfectly honest, I don't feel that I captured the likeness as much as I would have liked for this sculpture, but I gave myself a time frame to sculpt it in over a 2-week period, and at the end, I wasn't totally happy with it, but the time ran out, so I was done, and sometimes that's just how it goes. With each sculpture, you learn a little bit more, you get a little bit better. I like to use tools and technology to help me as I sculpt, but not to do the sculpting for me. For example, I really like the DaVinci Eye app, which allows me to overlay the reference image with the camera of my phone so that I can check the sculpture from the side view and from the front. But I don't want to be so dependent on this tool that I can't do any sculpting without it. So usually I'll use this a few times to check things in the beginning, and then I'll try to do most of the sculpting through observation. Sometimes the difference between a good likeness and one that's just not quite right is the accumulation of many tiny deviations in the relationships between the features. All of those little mistakes add up, and once there's too many, then we've lost the likeness. There's an interesting paradox when it comes to portrait sculpting, and that is that the closer it is to the likeness, to the actual person, the easier it is to see the mistakes in order to bring it the rest of the way towards that likeness. Whereas if it's really far away, let's say you're just beginning sculpting and it doesn't look like the person at all, then it's really hard to know what to change to get closer to that likeness. So that makes it so that the better you are, the easier it is to see how to improve the sculpture, whereas the worse you are, then you're more likely to get overwhelmed and you don't even know where to start. So once you're sculpting a specific person, then that person becomes the ideal. That's the goal. That's the target, is that person. That can be challenging as an artist or as a sculptor, which is why abstract art and abstract sculpting can be so fun, because you don't really have a specific target that you're going for. Maybe you're just trying to create something that's interesting or beautiful, so maybe that's the target, but that's a lot more vague of a target than trying to sculpt a specific person. So that means there's a much stricter judging criteria that people have when they see a sculpture that's figurative or that's of a specific person. As I was making this sculpture, my wife came in and said, oh, you know, the face looks like it needs to be a little bit rounder. And that was true, and once I made that change, it looked a lot better. Then when it was closer to the end, she said, it doesn't look like the person. And she was right. So I carved out the eyes and took off the mouth and tried to resculpt those features. I think it was a little bit better after that, but it's still, it still feels like it's not quite there. But to get as good as I would like to be, I need to do lots more sculptures. I need to do lots more portraits. And so that's the lesson is I just need to sculpt more. If you want to be good, if you want to master something, you just have to do it more. So don't get discouraged. Just move on to the next sculpture once you're done with this one. Each sculpture is a stepping stone in your journey towards mastery. Okay, so your assignment is to go and sculpt a celebrity or public figure. I look forward to seeing your submissions for this assignment over at Proko.com. Make sure that you submit and consider giving some feedback on other people's sculptures who have submitted for this assignment or past assignments. Specific critiques like, I think the nose is a little bit too small, or I think the eyes might be tilted a little bit downward on the outside corners more than the reference. Those specific critiques are really helpful. What isn't helpful is overly broad critiques like, this sculpture doesn't look like that person, or this sculpture is bad. It looks bad. You are a bad sculptor. That's not very helpful. It's not very constructive. So as we're helping each other out, be sure to be kind and courteous and specific with your constructive feedback. Remember that you don't have to have purchased the full course in order to submit assignments for the free video lessons. You just create a free account over at Proko.com and you can join the Proko community of artists and sculptors. So there's really no excuse not to get started sculpting. If you are serious about portrait sculpting, then I do recommend you get the full course over at Proko.com/portraitsculpt. There's additional lessons, longer demos, critique videos, and a lot more. So hopefully I'll see you soon over there. Stay creative, stay productive.